South Africa's Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan attempted to calm the public today with an announcement that the proposed national health insurance will not be an additional burden on taxpayers. Instead, the Mammoth Health Fund will be funded using the fiscus, employers' contributions and other funding mechanisms. The NHI is expected to cost South Africa 125 billion rand next year and 214 billion rand by 2020. Before we get into the discussion, let's take a look at what commentators were saying on Twitter about the plan today. St. Letse said the money required by the NHI will be funded by you, the taxpayer, over and above your normal income tax. Zuma passing the buck. Tumisho Masha says, with road tolling, the NHI, fuel levies and taxation, Mr. Zuma, my disposable income can't afford the corruption and secret trust funds anymore. And the DA saying that the NHI will not bring quality healthcare to all. With that, tee up to our discussion. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
Your comments, sir, on the proposed NHI.
Well, I think there's a trick here. If we look at health spending for next year, it's 120.5 billion rand. And you have an 11.4 billion rand contingency reserve. So you move 4 or 5 billion from the contingency reserve into the health fund and health department, and you rename it the National Health Insurance Fund. Also, we know that it's unlikely that we can afford more taxes in this country at this moment in time, like some of your friends on Twitter are saying to you. And I think that's going to have to be the way forward, because right now, if we add any more money to the employers of this country, who are far and few between, we're going to see employment growth again stagnate, and already we're in danger of a recessionary environment where jobs may go. And that might not be a good thing. The other thing is that nobody really thinks about all the time. For every one person working, there's 2.8 people surviving of that person. That is the 6th highest number in the world. So we have this strange situation where we've got too few people working. If we have even less people working, we're going to be running into serious problems, including political problems. So I really don't think the National Health Insurance, as was proposed in 2007, is going to fly. And I think there's a situation here where they're finding a way out of this by making it part of the normal health budget. If it isn't, then I'm afraid we are in for a very hard, rough time.
Mark, what is national health insurance then?
Well, you see, here, let's put it this way. National health insurance should be covering everybody. The government says it can, well, not that it can, but it could do that in its hospitals, and it doesn't like the idea that there's some sector of the population that through private healthcare get better treatment. But the problem is you can't make everybody's treatment one lot worse and the other one slightly better maybe, because even if you spend thousands and millions and billions and trillions on this thing, you don't have more doctors. You don't have more nurses all of a sudden. And we're now opening a new medical facility at Polokwane, which might not be the right University of Johannesburg wants one. They say that they can do it better. But let's open 2-3 medical facilities, put the dentists and the doctors and the optometrists and whatever else through there. Get the nursing colleges opened again, which we closed, and start with that type of situation, and then we can institute it over time. But you're going to take 20 years to get enough doctors, or 30 years to get enough doctors, or to, so you can't compare South Africa to, for example, a Germany or a UK.
Exactly. Mark, let's add your voice to this.
I just want to make sure, is the button ready to push? I mean, has this been debated? Is it been forensically analysed? And are we now good to go? Or is this yet another waffle thing that we're going through that's still got to go through Parliament and go through all sorts of iterations?
It has to go through Parliament. There's a green paper being released tomorrow, so we get more detail. But I would say that the start of this at least looks like an up till 2020, because if you look at that 214 billion number, that's about a 7% increase from the 2012 number per year. And if you look at nominal GDP, with other words, inflation and growth, you could quite easily get to 7%, in nominal terms, which will increase your tax take anyway there. So, and previously health funding was going to go up with 7.6% a year. So actually, health funding is now going to increase not quite as quickly as it was going to do during the medium-term budget policy statement.
Mike, what I can't come to terms with, our hospitals are in a dire situation. Not only are they being poorly run, there's no equipment, queues are, you have to queue for literally days to get attention. So what difference is it going to make? How's that suddenly going to change overnight? Surely the money should be spent improving what we already have before trying to bring on schemes.
This is the point that we were trying to make, is that spending money is not fixing the problem. And we already spend a lot of money. We spend about 4.9% of our GDP on public health care and another 4% or so, not quite 4%, on private health care. Now, they say that this is going to take healthcare spending to 6%. So if we're already at 4.9% and over the time till 2025 we're going to get to 6%, that already says that we're going to have a high public health spend. And in that sense, and it's going to get higher. But it's already saying to me that a huge amount of money, the 4.9 that we're now talking about, is more or less where 125 billion for next year would be as a percentage of GDP. So it looks like the health spend is just changing, or the Department of Health is just changing, and maybe they're giving themselves a bit of room to fix the problems first before they're going to institute more taxes. And by the way, this part of the cycle is not the part of the cycle where you introduce new taxes, because we all know the world is slowing down, and South Africa, quite quickly, if we look at today's manufacturing figures, they're in negative territory.
On that note, we've got to go to the manufacturing figures, and South Africa's manufacturing sector growth slowed slightly to 0.9% in June in year-on-year terms, according to Stats SA. Manufacturing grew at 1% in May. Now, economists are saying that the sector is significantly more depressed than it was in the first 3 months of the year, and the market is expecting a grim growth figure for the economy in the second half. Mike, just looking at that stat, and the Treasury forecasting 3.4% growth for the full year. The numbers that we're seeing from the manufacturing side are today, 16% of that GDP figure. Are we now going to be way below that target of 3.4?
It's very likely, because these manufacturing figures that came in were for the month of June. For the 3 months compared to the previous 3 months, seasonally adjusted and annualized, it's minus 7.7%. So we know that part of the GDP is going to be heavily negative. Mining came out negative as well. Seasonally adjusted and annualized, about 4.3% negative. Electricity was around zero. It now depends on the finance sector, which I don't think is doing too well. And it also depends on the retail sector and, tourism and hotels. So it's going to be difficult seeing a growth figure coming out much above 1% this sun. And we already know from the PMI that the July manufacturing figures are even worse. So we are probably already in a manufacturing recession. If you say that 2 quarters of growth would constitute a recession, then the manufacturing sector is already definitely in a recession, which is not a good thing. The global economy is slowing down right now. We know about 3 to 6 months later it hits us, but their slowdown did start a few months ago. So this is not a very happy picture at the moment for the South African economy.
Mining production also falling, but I assume that the miners are doing well, because that's just output, but with the higher prices probably that's keeping some support. But why did the Deputy Minister, I think yesterday, came out quite positive about we'll be okay, mainly supported by consumption, by consumer spending?
I think the fact of the matter is the consumer with higher electricity bills and toll roads now coming their way is also going to be under pressure, and you want to add a few taxes on the NHI side as well, then you can really make people squirm. I don't think I think there's a lot of bluffing going on here as well. And if we remember the last recession that we had this whole thing where when I announced we could be in a recession and we could be heading for a recession, I was trampled on by many business publications as well. 3 months later, we found out that we already were in the start of the recession period already. And the fact is we were running an election, and even Mr. Manuel and many others were going around saying there's no recession, but that was because of an election.
The number, Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan today saying that there's a 40% chance of the world dipping into a double dip global recession. Do you think that he's just playing politics again?
Yeah, well, I wrote a piece today for a news wire that I think that we've got a 30% chance ourselves of heading for a recession right now. And depending on what happens in the next 2 to 3 weeks, we could increase those chances quite quickly.
Mike,
so
it sounds
Mr.
like you want
Pravin
to talk
Gordhan's
us
saying
into a
40%,
recession.
he's got to say
Can I
that
get a
South
word
Africa
in
is also
edgeways?
there.
Can I get a
Sorry,
word in
yes,
edgeways?
yes,
It
no.
sounds like you're actually talking us into a recession in the real world, as opposed to the ivory tower that you inhabit. Companies don't obsess about dodgy government figures that come out and tell you what happened in the past. They're more interested in Impact, which is a packaging company that we were talking about just now, not only increased its top line in this period, but actually improved its profit margins too. And in fact, in this recessionary period that we've been through, a number of companies I'm quite close to have used this as an opportunity to get leaner and fitter. Okay, and in fact, many companies have come through the downturn pretty well. I think this is a very good opportunity to profit, because there's some very good
we have to
companies
give
out
Mike
there.
a chance to respond, because you've just openly attacked him on this news piece. If I don't get the right to
But
respond, he may never
we're
come
on a
back
money
in again.
program, so we have to look at profit as well as doom and gloom.
Mike,
Well,
right to
there's a
respond,
difference.
sir.
Yeah, there's a difference between making profits, because you could always become, as he said, leaner and meaner and fire a lot of people. But you know, for the people that you're firing, and for the majority of us, the way that a recession is defined, that's what's happening out there. And I didn't come out with these figures. They come from Stats SA that the manufacturing sector is right now in a negative period. I'm just adding one more negative period to it, because I think the figures from the PMI are very bad for July, and we can see through that is a manufacturing recession period that we're entering into. We can see the numbers from the mining. Despite the biggest commodity boom in our lifetime happening, our mining production is declining, which is absurd. So I'm not disagreeing with Mark. I think he's got to be careful what he's talking about, because one company or a few companies making profit, they're always auctioneers do very well in recession periods, and if you're repackaging things and you've got a bit of more market share, you can also do things well. But the fact of the matter is, the real economy in the terms of manufacturing and mining already are in a recession. Eskom or the power sector is maybe not, but it's very flat. Probably we're not quite in a recession for this quarter that's gone by. With other words, the second quarter, as we said, it's probably going to be growth around about 1%. But after that, we could be heading in
I
this
would like
time
to
period
let this
for
go
that.
further, gentlemen. The journalist in me is looking at ratings going through the roof, a fight on the Business Tonight news desk. I would love to fuel it. Unfortunately, I've got the director saying I've got another guest waiting in studio. Thank you very much for your
Pleasure.
time, Mike. Thank you very much, Mark.